The strange foods soldiers ate to survive. War dark food history. Wars are often remembered through weapons, swords, rifles, cannons, tanks, bombs. But most armies do not collapse because they run out of courage. They collapse because they run out of food. A soldier can carry a weapon for miles, but he cannot march forever on an empty stomach. He cannot dig trenches without calories. He cannot stand guard through winter without salt, fat, grain, and water. And when supply lines broke, soldiers ate whatever war left behind. Rock-hard biscuits full of insects. Salt meat so tough it had to be hacked apart. Horse flesh after the cavalry died. Thin soup made from scraps. Coffee substitutes. Emergency chocolate. Canned meat that became a joke, a curse, and a memory. A ration is not just food. It is military strategy you can chew. This is the dark history of the strange food soldiers ate to survive war. Part 1. An army is a hungry machine. Every army is a moving appetite. Each soldier needs food. Each horse needs fodder. Each cook needs fuel. Each wagon needs animals. Each camp needs water. The larger the army, the larger the hunger. History often celebrates commanders who moved fast, struck boldly, and won battles. But behind them were bakers, butchers, wagon drivers, quartermasters, farmers, cooks, and foragers. Without them, glory starved. Food determines distance. It determines speed. It determines morale. It determines who can fight after winter. An army may have discipline, weapons, and courage, but if it cannot eat, it becomes a crowd of exhausted men. This is why military food has always been practical rather than beautiful. It must last, travel, resist spoilage, be divided, be cooked with limited fuel, be eaten quickly, survive rain, heat, insects, and bad roads. War food is not designed for pleasure. It is designed to keep bodies moving through misery. Part 2. Hardtack, the bread that would not die. One of the most famous military foods was hardtack, a simple biscuit made from flour, water, and sometimes salt. Baked hard, dried hard, stored hard, so hard that soldiers joked about needing to break it with rifle butts. Hardtack could last for months or years if kept dry. That made it valuable. But valuable does not mean pleasant. It could be tooth-breaking, stale, dusty, infested with weevils. Soldiers soaked it in coffee, crumbled it into soup, fried it in fat when they had fat, ate it in the dark, and tried not to think about what was inside. Hardtack represents the military food bargain perfectly. It was awful because it survived. Soft bread is comforting but perishable. Hard bread is miserable but useful. The soldier does not get the food he wants. He gets the food that can follow him. A biscuit that refuses to rot can become both salvation and punishment. The taste of hardtack was the taste of logistics. Dry, hard, necessary. Part 3. Salt meat and the endless chew. Before refrigeration, armies relied heavily on salted meat. Salt pork, salt beef, dried fish, smoked meat. These foods could travel, but they carried their own suffering. Salt meat could be tough, overpowering, rancid, too salty to eat without soaking. Soldiers might boil it repeatedly to make it tolerable. The broth could be used for soup. The meat could still be stringy and unpleasant, but it provided protein and fat mattered deeply. A hungry soldier can survive on grain for a while, but without fat, cold, and exhaustion cut deeper. Meat also boosted morale. A ration of meat told soldiers that the army had not completely abandoned them. But bad meat could do the opposite. It could become a symbol of neglect. Spoiled barrels, rotten supplies, contractors selling inferior food. Armies have long suffered not only from enemy action, but from corruption in supply. The soldier at the front pays for dishonesty with his stomach. Part 4. Foraging, stealing, and living off the land. When supply lines failed, armies foraged. That word can sound gentle, but in war, foraging often meant taking food from civilians. Grain from barns, animals from farms, vegetables from fields, wine from cellars, hay for horses, firewood from fences and houses. To the army, it was survival. To civilians, it could be disaster. An army passing through could eat a village's winter. This is why war and famine often travel together. Soldiers eat because they must. Civilians starve because soldiers came. For the soldier, foraging could also be dangerous. Scattered men could be ambushed. Food could be hidden. Fields could be burned. Water could be unsafe. A soldier might cook whatever he found. Unripe fruit, raw grain, stolen chickens, root vegetables pulled too early. War reduces cuisine to opportunity. If it can be carried, cooked, or chewed, it enters the campaign. Part 5. Horses, mules, and the final reserve. In many wars, animals were not only companions or transport. They were emergency food. When armies starved, horses and mules could be slaughtered. This was a terrible sign. A horse fed the army twice. First by moving supplies. Then, if desperation came, by becoming meat. But eating transport destroys future movement. It is the same famine logic as eating seed grain. Survive today by consuming tomorrow. Soldiers in retreat, trapped armies, and besieged garrisons often reach this point. The animal that carried ammunition yesterday might become soup today. The cavalry mount might become a ration. The mule that pulled the wagon might become the last protein in camp. This is not simply brutal. It is a signal that the army is entering collapse. Once an army eats its mobility, it becomes slower, weaker, and harder to save. War turns practical relationships into tragic ones. The horse's labor, then meat, then memory. Part 6, Canned War. The rise of canned food changed military history. Cans could hold meat, vegetables, soups, and condensed milk far longer than fresh foods. They could be transported across distance. They could feed soldiers in places where cooking was difficult. But early canned food was not always loved. Cans could be heavy, hard to open, uneven in quality, sometimes spoiled, sometimes mysterious. Soldiers gave nicknames to ration foods. They complained, joked, traded, hoarded, threw away what they hated when they could afford to. A ration can become part of soldier culture. Not just nutrition, but language. This can of meat, that biscuit, this emergency chocolate, that powdered drink. The food becomes a shared experience of discomfort. Everyone knows the taste. Everyone knows the joke. Everyone knows the smell when the can opens. Military food is often remembered because it repeats, day after day, meal after meal. The same texture becomes part of the war. Part 7, Coffee, Tea, Sugar, and Morale. Not all military rations were about calories alone. Some were about morale, coffee, tea, sugar, tobacco, chocolate, alcohol in some armies. These items mattered because war exhausts the mind. A hot drink can make cold bearable. Sugar can give quick energy. Coffee can keep a soldier awake. Tea can create a moment of normality. Chocolate can feel like kindness inside an inhuman system. Commanders and quartermasters learn that morale is also logistical. A soldier who receives a warm drink may feel remembered. A soldier without it may feel abandoned. Small comforts become large in war. A spoonful of sugar, a tin cup of coffee, a square of chocolate, a cigarette after a march. These do not solve hunger, but they help the mind endure the conditions that hunger creates. War food feeds more than the body. It feeds the will to continue. Part 8. The trench, the camp, and the improvised meal. Soldiers rarely eat exactly what planners imagined. Rations meet reality. Rain soaks biscuits. Mud enters everything. Fuel runs out. Enemy fire interrupts cooking. Cooks improvise. Soldiers trade. A can of meat is stretched into stew. Hard bread is softened in coffee. Onions or potatoes are added if found. Fat is treasured. Spices are rare. The field kitchen becomes a place of invention. Sometimes soldiers create meals that become legendary within their units. Not because they are objectively good, but because they were eaten during misery. A bad stew after a freezing march can become unforgettable. A cup of hot soup near the front can feel like rescue. Food memories in war are intense because the body's under pressure. The hunger is real. The cold is real. The fear is real. So even poor food can become emotionally powerful. Part 9, When Rations Fail. The darkest military food stories begin when rations fail completely. Encircled armies, retreating columns, prisoners of war, soldiers cut off in winter, men trapped in jungles, deserts, mountains, or snow. Then the menu changes. Leather, grass, tree bark, dead animals, emergency slaughter, insects, anything. At this point, the soldier becomes like the famine victim. The uniform no longer protects him from the oldest human question. What is still food when food is gone? Military discipline may slow collapse, but it cannot replace calories forever. A starving army becomes vulnerable to disease, cold, panic, desertion, and defeat. Many campaigns have been decided not by the most dramatic battle, but by hunger before the battle. War history often begins with strategy. It should also begin with breakfast. Part 10, The Ration as Memory. When soldiers return home, they often remember ration foods with strange emotion. Disgust, nostalgia, humor, trauma. A biscuit can become a joke. A can of meat can become a symbol of misery. A chocolate bar can become a memory of kindness. A cup of coffee can recall an entire winter. Food marks war because food enters the body. It is not distant like a map. It is intimate. The soldier tastes the supply chain. He tastes the decisions of officers, the honesty of contractors, the strength of roads, the weather, the enemy's blockade, the nation's capacity to feed him. Every ration is a message. You are supported, or you are forgotten. You will march tomorrow, or you will starve here. The strange food soldiers ate were not side notes. They were the hidden engine of war. Hardtack kept armies moving. Salt meat kept bodies alive. Coffee kept eyes open. Canned food changed distance. Horse meat signaled desperation. Foraging spread hunger to civilians. And failed rations turned soldiers into famine survivors. So when we remember wars, we should not only remember the weapons. We should remember the pots, the biscuits, the ration cards, the cold coffee, the salted meat, the animals slaughtered at the edge of retreat, because every army marches on food. And when the food fails, history changes. Part 11, the soldier's private pantry. Official rations were only part of what soldiers ate. Every soldier tried to create a private pantry, a piece of bread hidden in a pocket, a little sugar saved for later, coffee grounds used twice, a tin kept after the meal, an onion bought from a civilian, a biscuit traded for tobacco, a spoonful of jam saved for a worse day. These small acts mattered because war removed control. A soldier was told where to march, when to sleep, when to fight, and often when to eat. Saving food was a way to regain a piece of personal power. A hidden ration said, "I have something for later." In war, later is never guaranteed. That is why soldiers often became experts in tiny economies. Trading, hoarding, sharing, scrounging, improvising. Food moved through armies in unofficial ways, carried by friendship, luck, theft, barter, and memory. The ration was official, but survival was personal. Part 12, Why Bad Food Becomes Legend. Many military foods are remembered with disgust and affection at the same time. This seems strange until you understand war memory. A hated biscuit can become funny years later. A terrible stew can become a story. A can of meat can symbolize an entire campaign. The food was bad, but everyone endured it together. Shared misery can become identity. Veterans may laugh about a ration they once cursed because the laughter proves they survived it. The food becomes a password. Only those who were there know the taste. Only they remember how hard it was to chew. Only they know what it meant to receive a hot drink after a freezing night. This is why military food belongs to emotional history. It is not just logistics. It is memory packed in tins, sacks, cups, and crumbs. The army may issue a ration for the body, but the soldier carries it into the soul. Part 13, Food as Discipline. Military food is also a tool of discipline. Rations are counted, issued, withheld, punished, stolen, shared. A commander who controls food controls time, movement, and obedience. A hungry soldier may still follow orders, but only to a point. When rations fail, discipline weakens. Men wander to forage. Units slow down. Tempers rise. Disease spreads. Desertion becomes more likely. This is why feeding soldiers is not kindness added to war. It is part of command itself. The ration line can be as important as the ammunition cart. A general may win a battle on paper and lose the campaign through hunger. Food discipline is quiet but relentless. It tells the soldier when the army is functioning and when the army is becoming a mob. Part 14, The Taste of Home. Soldiers have always tried to bring home into war through food. A spice from home, a family recipe remembered over a campfire. A holiday meal recreated badly but sincerely. A letter describing what is being cooked far away. A package from family with sweets, dried meat, tea, coffee, or bread. These foods could matter more than their calories. They reminded soldiers that they were not only bodies in uniform. They were sons, fathers, brothers, husbands, friends. War rations kept the body alive. Food from home kept identity alive. That is why a small parcel could feel miraculous. A cookie, a preserved fruit, a piece of sausage, or a familiar tea could briefly undo the distance between battlefield and kitchen. The strange foods of war were endured because soldiers had to survive. The familiar foods were treasured because soldiers had to remember why survival mattered. Part 15, Prisoners, Blockades, and the Lowest Rations. The darkest military food stories often belong to prisoners and blockaded forces. A soldier in a functioning army may hate his ration, but at least the ration arrives. A prisoner may have no such certainty. Food becomes punishment, control, humiliation, and survival all at once. A thin soup can be used to keep prisoners barely alive. A piece of bread can be measured with cruelty. A bowl can be withheld. A ration can be reduced until weakness becomes part of captivity. Blockaded soldiers experience a similar narrowing of life. The outside world may contain food, but the trapped body cannot reach it. This is where military hunger merges with famine. Uniforms, ranks, and flags begin to matter less than calories. The officer and the private both calculate the same thing. How much is left? How long can the body continue? What can still be eaten? War turns food into command, but extreme war turns food into a test of the human body itself. Part 16, The Cooks No One Remembers. Behind every army were cooks whose work rarely appears in heroic paintings. They woke before others, managed fires, carried water, stretched ingredients, improvised when wagons failed, tried to make terrible rations edible. A good cook could raise morale with almost nothing. A bad supply situation could defeat even the best cook. Military cooks stood between logistics and the soldier's stomach. They translated sacks, tins, bones, flour, and scraps into something that resembled a meal. Their work did not win glory, but it helped armies endure. Every hot stew in a cold camp was a small act of organization against chaos. Every shared pot reminded soldiers that the army had not fully dissolved. War history remembers generals, but soldiers often remembered the person who could turn rations into warmth. This was the dark history of the strange foods soldiers ate to survive war.